So this is the resistance report for day 517. Since October 7th, it's the ceasefire day 47. Like I said, I'm going to be reporting on the Israeli military investigations into the October 7th raid on the Nahal Oz military base. The Israeli military investigation was released on Monday, March the 3rd, and I am reporting this on Thursday, March the 6th. If we just pull up this full map of Gaza, Nahal Oz is in the north. It's across from 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜. And just to note that the entire Gaza envelope runs along that red dotted line that is the border there. The Gaza envelope is a series of villages and military bases, kibbutz, moshavs, that are all along the border that literally envelop the Gaza Strip. If we look at the next map, we can see it up close where we're talking in northern Gaza. That area all along the Gaza envelope remains a closed military zone. There has not been reconstruction in the Gaza envelope. 4 kilometers deep is a closed military zone today, and Nahal Oz kibbutz is still has not been rebuilt, along with many of the other kibbutz. The base is not functioning, and much of the base was destroyed by airstrikes. If we look at the next map even closer, we can see the proximity from 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜, which is east of Gaza City, to Nahal Oz military base. This map doesn't have, the main maps don't have, you can go to Google Maps and look, and you don't see Nahal Oz base, but it is a principal base, a core base for the military. It is the home of the Gaza Division's Northern Brigade and the Combat Intelligence Collection Corps. So it's a key base, and it was one of the main bases targeted on October 7th. The Israeli military has held up these investigations for more than 6 months. They didn't want to release these investigations during the war because the ones that have been released so far are underscored by devastating cowardice and failure. And they didn't want that while their soldiers were fighting in Gaza to be shown how badly and how comprehensively the Gaza division was dismantled, and the IDF at large on October 7th. The Nahal Oz example is a really strong one, and it matches with videos released by 𝐓𝐡𝐞, which allows us to compare both of those. So 𝐓𝐡𝐞 has made a complete video of the Nahal Oz raid, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And the reason why we know about what we know about October 7th is from the civilians, because it was more difficult to keep the civilians under wrap. But the military bases themselves have been covered by a strict military censor, and none of the information from inside the bases has been released since October 7th. And so this is the beginning of that. And yeah, like I said, we know about the civilians because they had the WhatsApp groups and they were communicating, and they spoke to the media and spoke amongst themselves primarily after and during October 7th. So we have heard from them, but we have not heard from the Israeli military. And just to note, the October Council Families Forum, which is the bereaved families of October 7th, they are not impressed by this investigation. They called the specific internal investigations into October 7th are only the tip of the iceberg and do not replace full state commissions. So these are preliminary investigations. They looked into 40 different battles, and the families of the bereaved families are not impressed by these reports. If we look at the next frame, you can see Nahal Oz. This is from 𝐓𝐡𝐞's video. You can see on the left of your screen is the base, and up at the top to the right with that cluster of trees, that is the kibbutz Nahal Oz. And again, this is how Israel is built. This is the making military positions civilian positions in order to gain legitimacy for them, to use them as human shields. The history of Nahal Oz is a very telling story of the Gaza envelope. It was built in 1951 after the ethnic cleansing of southern Israel. and people were pushed as refugees into the Gaza Strip. In 1951, it was a military position for the Nahal Brigade, and 2 years later, the kibbutz was set up. And again, core MO to create human shields to cast legitimacy on military positions and establish, as Israel likes to call it, facts on the ground by moving in civilians. Nahal Oz was initially was a, initially named literally in Hebrew, Nahal soldiers across from Gaza. That's what its literal name was. After a raid in 1956 from Gaza on the Nahal Oz kibbutz, Israeli military chief of staff Moshe Dayan talked about the Gaza envelope and Nahal Oz specifically. And I'm going to read to you from his eulogy for a security chief at Nahal Oz that was killed in a raid by fighters from Gaza. He said in the eulogy, "Let us not cast blame. For 8 years, they have been sitting in the refugee camps in Gaza, and before their eyes, we have been transforming the lands and villages where they and their fathers dwelt into our estate. How did we shut our eyes and refuse to look squarely at the fate and see in all its brutality the destiny of our generation? Have we forgotten that this group of young people dwelling at Nahal Oz is bearing the heavy weight of Gaza on its shoulders? Beyond the furrow of the border, a sea of hatred and desire for revenge is swelling, awaiting the day when serenity will dull our path. To the young security chief who left Tel Aviv to build his home at the gates of Gaza, to be a wall for us, the gates of Gaza weighed too heavily on his shoulders and overcame him." So, right away, right from the beginning of the creation of the Gaza envelope, it was a target for raids. And it was put very bluntly that this security officer who was killed was being a wall for Israel. And that is the nature of the Gaza envelope. So, the target of Nahal Oz is rich in symbolism and history. And let's take a look at that raid right now, because 𝐤𝐿 put together a full video on the raid, which I will walk you through. Right here, we're seeing the launch of the rockets that began the raid, the dropping from drones onto the sentry towers, the watchtowers. We're watching now a drone strike on a patrol along the border. And again, the launch of rockets throughout the day, more than 4,000, which is more than the 2014 war. Here we're seeing fighters driving with literally rockets flying over their heads. There's the breach and the paragliders, famous sights from there from October 7th. Again, a very clean breach. I'm going to break these down. You'll get a chance to see them again, but they move quickly, but I'm going to break them down one by one after this video. You can see the fighters breaching here. There's breaches in more than 114 spots in the fence. And Israel talked a lot about how 5,500 people, terrorists, they said, crossed into Israel on October 7th. But the real raid on Nahal Oz is 162 Israeli military soldiers at Nahal Oz base versus 65 Nukba elite Qassam forces that you're looking at here. These are the 65 forces that overran this base. And they overran this base, according to the Israeli report, within 15 minutes of touching the perimeter. And they touched the perimeter 10 minutes after crossing the fence. Essentially dismantled the Gaza division within minutes of this operation. You can see the fighters moving through the walls that they knew about. They understood the layout of the base. And one part of this story that's important to note is that the first people to flee were the Golani Brigade staff officers who up and left and ran off from the base and left their soldiers to fight. So within minutes, again, they're at the base. They reach the base, and you can see here they have captured all those vehicles. That's one of the automatic machine gun towers. There's the captured soldiers that would be taken back into Gaza. And there's the photo from the drone that I showed you before. Now we'll break these down one by one because there was 3 waves, but we're going to focus on the first wave that was 65 Nukba Special Forces, Qassam elite forces that carried out this raid. There was a second and a third wave of 50 and 100 more that came at 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., but the raid itself is the raid that starts at 6:30. So let's look at number 4. This is the covering fire. This was critical to the functioning of the entire operation. Israel captured in Gaza a Qassam document during the war, according to this investigation, that detailed the attack on Nahal Oz that said a steep trajectory of rocket fire will chase the soldiers into their shelters, which is exactly what happened. The soldiers fled into their shelters, left their positions, which was the purpose of the rocket fire. The rocket fire had 2 purposes. It also was fired at the Air Force air bases, which prevented planes from taking off and helicopters from taking off, and created confusion. But these rockets were fired at the bases to get the soldiers to hide, which they did, according to the IDF investigation. The IDF failed in the battle to protect Nahal Oz base. The battle results express a systematic failure in the IDF's base readiness for a wide-scale ground attack accompanied by rocket fire. So Qassam knew what it was doing with this rocket fire. 1,406 rockets between 6:29 a.m. on October 7th and 7 a.m. when the raid inside Nahal Oz had begun. If we look at number 5, the other critical part of this was the blinding operation. The blinding operation of the towers. You can see the way that drones are used to take out the towers. That's a critical aspect of this because it left the Israeli military blind. It took the electromagnetic spectrum away from them with all of their technology that links and communicates. They dropped all their communications. You can look at number 6, the use of the Al-Ghul sniper rifle, which we saw all through Gaza during the war, being used to take out one of the automatic machine guns. According to the Israelis, all towers but one were destroyed in these minutes, these 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes after 6:29 a.m. when the operation began. If we look at number 7, this is the breaching video. The rocket fire starts at 6:29. At 6:34 a.m., the first breaches are happening. And you can see them there with the paraglider going across. This breach is very clean. And there's 114 of these breaches up and down the border of Gaza. And the Israelis, because of the blinding operation, the Israelis didn't know this part was happening. Only 40%, there was only 40% awareness of the 114 breaches by 7:30 a.m., 60% by 10 a.m., and 85% by 11:30 a.m. So by 11:30 a.m., when effectively the raid was over, Israel still didn't know how many breaches in the wall there were. If we look at the next slide, you can see the clear. Is this the next? Yeah, this is 8. You can see how clear clean the breach was. And this is something that Qassam trained years for under Israel's eyes. And there's all through the report about how they watched this training happen. Previous to Sinwar's leadership, the core training in Gaza happened at night. The fighters would train by and large at night. Sinwar changed that under his leadership in the late 2010s. They started training out in the open, and the women surveillance officers of the IDF talked about how they watched these operations, these breaching operations. Qassam would build replicas of the fence and blow it up in the exact way that we saw. And you can see that breach right there is so well done that the truck that you look at in the bottom right-hand corner, the truck picks up the fighter who laid the breaching charge, and he hops in the truck, and the trucks drive through there. Nahal Oz base is only 850 meters away from 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜, so they were able to reach the base within minutes. At 6:45 a.m., the military study by the Israeli military said that the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters had reached the perimeter of Nahal Oz base, and that breach that you're seeing on your screen right there, according to the camera of 𝐓𝐡𝐞, was at 6:37. So a rapid approach. If we look at number 9, I just wanted to show you the way they use drones to do this. You can see the targets in this one, and then the next slide, you can see it launch. These are, and then this is the video of it. Up next, you can show that one tomorrow, number 12. These are 𝐓𝐡𝐞 drone grenades. These are M67 clones that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 built. This goes back to Adnan al-Ghul creating these weapons, and they just used the hand grenades from the drones. And you can see here, you can see the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 elite forces waiting at that breach, and the drone is pushing back the Israeli soldiers at that breach. So there really is a combined operations. You see these soldiers, you see them scatter, and then watch when the camera zooms out down in the bottom left, you see the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 soldiers waiting there. So they're using air support. They're using a combined arms operation here to get through. It's pretty remarkable, and this video shows it very, very clearly. This is a combined arms operation in other ways too, and elsewhere on October 7th, because we know that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters went in paragliders, they went by sea, so land, air, and sea, but ironically not by tunnel, which is what Israel thought the invasion would. If an invasion happened, it would be small scale and it would be through a single tunnel. And that's what the wall, the iron wall that Israel built, is intended to stop tunnels. And the Palestinians just cut right through it. Okay, this next slide is going to have audio in it. And just as a heads up, it's got gunshots in it. So just be warned about that. But this is the breach of the base with the soundtrack from the video, number 13. So you can actually hear the incoming and outgoing rounds going by the heads of the soldiers in these. This is remarkable footage of an historic event, and you can see that they knew exactly where to go. And like I said earlier, senior staff officers had fled the base at this point. By 7:05 a.m., 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is inside the command center of the base. And by 8:30 a.m., they have it encircled. According to the report by the IDF, the level of detail in the document found in Gaza about Nahal Oz is better than IDF Special Forces dossiers the IDF probe found. The document detailed the exact layout of the base, including the bomb shelters, barracks, generator rooms, communication antennas, surveillance cameras, and the war room. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 knew where the commanders slept, how effective the shelters would be against rocket fire, how many soldiers had weapons, and where they stored those weapons. This is a Tier 1 Special Operations Force raid. That's my commentary. The quote had ended. My commentary is this is a Tier 1 Special Operations Force raid. If we look at number 14, this still is a memorable still, because this is the tower and fence that is all around Palestine. And when Palestine gets a modicum of justice, these towers will fall, and this is what is all wrapped around in the West Bank, and this moment where the fighter is reaching this tower, and he speaks. This fighter, he says, "Here are the sons of 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Here are the sons of Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. Here are the sons of the Palestinian people. They are reclaiming what is called the Gaza envelope. These are our lands, our brothers. These are our lands." That's what the fighter's saying in that moment of that still shot. So fighters obviously keenly aware of the Gaza envelope in the exact same way that Moshe Dayan, the Israeli chief of staff in the 1950s, portended. Number 15, this is another still of them entering the base. And again, you can see how few fighters it is, how well organized they are. They had studied Nahal Oz from afar for years prior, according to the study. They knew where every room was. So complete, the study said, was their assessment from social media descriptions, often simply posts that soldiers snapped next to the different buildings in different rooms on their first or last day in that position as they rotated in and out. The Israeli military official probe of the battle has concluded that Qassam did not need a single spy to pull off its highly specific infiltration plan. They just did it with uh, IDF's TikTok soldiers. TikTok soldiers did it before they went into Gaza and TikToked. They allowed they contributed to their forces being dismantled by their TikToks inside Israel. The interrogators and physical evidence that the IDF found that Hamas had built, that Qassam had built mock-ups of the IDF position, and they were able to build scale mock-ups and rehearse the attack and note the professional tactics used and the scale of the weaponry carried by Qassam. Their anti-armor ambushes were able to take out 3 main battle tanks and 2 armored personnel carriers. So this is consistent with the result on the base. If we look at 16, you can see the captured equipment. Qassam had all of those vehicles. You can see the Merkava tanks in the top right corner. Those are Ashgarit armored personnel carriers that you see along the bottom there, and Namur troop carriers as well. At 8:09 a.m., the Israeli military had a counterattack in place. Tanks and APCs arrived at 8:26 a.m. The 3 tanks were disabled and destroyed by Yasin fire. 1 tank hit by 2 Yasin strikes, and the tank was destroyed inside the base. At 10 a.m., soldiers from inside that tank were captured and taken back to Gaza. Nahal Oz, according to the Israeli military, Nahal Oz base was subject to the most Israeli Air Force airstrikes, 14 drone strikes inside the base, 6 helicopter strikes, Hellfire missile strikes, and 150 Apache 30 millimeter chain gun strikes inside the base. And this is something that upset the families of the bereaved. The families said that the Israeli military tampered with evidence, destroyed audio files after 5 a.m., critical audio files that talked about what was happening in the communications between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. when this raid happened, and that the bases were destroyed. And that is the case with many of these bases on October 7th. Israel blew up the bases so that there wasn't evidence left for. In the same way that after they Hannibaled all the cars, they buried the cars and took away that evidence. If we look at number 17, you can see the use of the drone strike on the left-hand side of your screen there. Aerial drone strike on a Merkava tank that disabled that tank. And again, there's 3 tanks taken out during the attempt to rescue. If we look at number 18, you can see the soldiers captured here. In all, 53 soldiers, Israeli soldiers, were killed inside the base at Nahal Oz. 10 soldiers were abducted and brought to Gaza in Israeli military Hummers. So that is the video matching up pretty much exactly with the numbers. And if we look at this one last video, Nahal Oz has a history. I showed this before, but I want to show this. This is 2014 Qassam raid during the 2014 war on the Nahal Oz pillbox. This is 9 Qassam fighters who were in a tunnel for 17 days waiting in position. They pop out of this tunnels, and again, it's not very many fighters. It's a single squad, 9 fighters, 1 team, able to use the tunnel to get close to the Nahal Oz pillbox. This pillbox was also destroyed after this raid. Israel denied that this raid happened at the time, and Qassam released this video a few days later, and the Israelis looked like the liars that they are. Consistent without these videos of the resistance. You can see an early scene there in the with the fighter right there with his helmet cam. This is a foreshadowing of many of the operations of this past war from 2014. And this is up till this point was one of the most significant raids carried out by Palestinian forces, and they came very close on this raid to capturing an Israeli soldier. Um, they timed this raid. They had an internal clock of 10 minutes before, because they knew also on October 7th, they knew how long, and Israel found this in their documents, that they knew how long it would take for each type of vehicle to respond to the attack. They knew that at Nahal Oz, and that's in 2014. And that's what times their raid here. And they knew it on October 7th. And that's why they were able to ambush that rescue force that came on October 7th. They knew it was coming. They knew the timing, and they had part of their squad waiting for it to destroy it. So these are elite forces, special forces. They're called Nukba forces in 𝐓𝐡𝐞, but they're based. This raid is principally carried out by the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 battalion. And there was 3 waves. I'm just focusing on the first wave of October 7th, but there was 3 waves that we'll get into more in the coming weeks as more of these investigations come out. So here they are entering the pillbox. You can see in a moment here a soldier who tries to flee. It is in the process of being captured. Had he been captured, this would have been um, a story that everyone in the world would have heard about, like when the tank gunner that everybody knows his name was captured in 2006, and it became a story, and 1,000 prisoners were released, including Yahya Sinwar. You can see there where the blur is blurred out there. They have a soldier captured, and one Israeli fires from the tower and hits one of the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters, but they don't murder, they don't execute the soldier on the spot. They move, they take his gun here. They took his Tavor X95, which we've seen in many of the prisoner exchange releases videos, where you see the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters holding, there you see the weapon there. At this point, this was the only one that was in Gaza, but October 7th, they captured a whole bunch of them. So this is a historic raid. All 9 fighters emerged back into through the same tunnel safely. They brought their injured comrade back. They didn't capture the soldier, but they captured the gun. And so Nahal Oz has a long history from from its creation right through the last 2 important wars in Gaza. So that is the resistance report for this week, the Nahal Oz raid, and I will be reporting on more of these Israeli military studies that come out. There is supposed to be 40 of them coming out. Just the tip of the iceberg, as was said.